for you and me. Another key change, oh God, oh no. Gig nightmares for you and me. All right, Gig Nightmares. Here we are today with a very special guest, Mr. Richie Ranno of the band Starz. Richie, how are you doing today?
Great, Max. Nice to hear from you.
So obviously it's an honor to be speaking with you today. So for my listeners, I'm going to give just a short backstory. So aside from playing in Starz, releasing some excellent music in the mid to late 70s, you were also in the 70s rock group Stories. You were one of 3 guitarists who auditioned to replace Randy Rhoads after his tragic passing in 1982. You've toured alongside plenty other legendary acts of the era, such as Kiss, Pat Travers, ZZ Top, Peter Frampton, Ted Nugent, Foghat, Oyster Cult, Bob Seger, Cheap Trick when they were known as Fuse, REO Speedwagon, Styx, Black Oak, Arkansas, Johnny Winter, the Eagles, Lynyrd Skynyrd. The list just goes on, and you're still going strong today.
You missed Aerosmith.
Oh, right, Aerosmith. That was a big one also.
Yeah, we did most of the 1976 whole national tour.
Just awesome stuff. And you're still going strong today. I think you quoted yourself playing 155 gigs in 2023 alone.
At least. I've already done 160 this year.
Oh, that's beautiful. That's awesome. So I first saw you in 2016 in Teaneck, New Jersey, when you got up and played a few songs with Danger. And then recently saw your solo show at Brick and Brew in Franklin. So after catching up for a little, I told you about this podcast I've been doing. So I'll ask you the question that I asked you then. When you hear the words Gig Nightmares, what's the first memory that pops in your head?
Well, I don't have anything that I would consider to be a nightmare, because nightmare gigs are like when Cheap Trick played and the tornado hit. You're familiar with that one?
No, I'm not really familiar.
Oh, and a tornado came from behind him out of nowhere. I think it was in Canada, which you don't get too many tornadoes there. No warning, and knocked the whole stage or parts of the stage over. And thank God they got away without getting injured. Of course, they're friends of mine. But geez, Rick lost a whole bunch of guitars, and the whole thing was disastrous. I don't know if anyone got killed, but it was bad. It was bad, and that's a bad one. And of course, the Who concert in Cincinnati.
Yep.
At Riverfront, which, by the way, we played Riverfront twice that year prior to that accident, and I specifically saw the crowd running from the doors to the stage, and I pointed out to my band members, and I said, this is really dangerous. What the hell goes on here? It was the only place I ever saw that did that, the only arena that allowed that kind of insanity. So I guess that was in the making. That was the same year, 1979. We played with Rush in January of that year. It was the Hemispheres tour.
Okay.
Oh, in fact, maybe we played with Ted Nugent in 78, but we played there twice in a short span of time. And I'm not exactly sure of the one day, but I just remember the one was definitely January with Rush. And the Who thing, I think, happened much later in that year. But, there's some pretty horrible things that happened. But, do you want to hear the only thing I could really even think of, and it's not really a nightmare, it's just a pain in the ass kind of a gig.
Oh, sure.
Well, I was doing an All-Stars, my Richie Ranno's All-Stars, it's called. And it was just my trio. And we were playing a town in Bergen County that was having an outdoor wet down. You know what a wet down is?
No, I'm not familiar.
It's when the town gets a new fire truck. These are towns that don't have paid firemen. They have volunteer firemen, who I have ultimate respect for. So it wasn't that kind of a thing. But they evidently don't know how to run a concert. So I'm not going to say the name of the town, but they were having this wet down. They hired my trio, and they got the county band shell, which is like a portable thing that they'll tow into a place, and you can use it. It's like I think it's made out of metal, to tell you the truth. So, and it's a shell, so it reverberates. The sound reverberates out of it. But they had every town, like every fire engine that they had in that town, was it all set up in this humongous parking lot area. I don't know exactly where the parking lot was in that town now. When I think back, it's about 15 years ago, and they were all the sirens were going off at once. And of course I have tinnitus, so that was annoying enough as it was. But so they got water shooting up like 100 feet from all the hoses. And it turned out to be a very cold fall day. So the water was not the thing that was going over too big there. So then we were facing straight up, and the fire engines all the way to our right, and straight up 100 yards up was the beer tent, and it was to the left a little bit, and there was a railing that went up from the left side of the stage straight up to the beer tent. So now we're getting ready to start, and I noticed there's no one in front of us at all. We're playing for no one, but I could see lots of people 100 yards away at the beer tent, and the sirens are still going off. So I go up to like one of the head guys for the fire department. I say, listen, we're going to start in 5 minutes. Can you turn off the fire engines, please? And he said, oh no, the sirens, they just keep going. I said, no, we can't play to that. He goes, well, that's what happens. I said, okay. And the other thing is, why are there no people down here? He said, oh, they're not allowed there.
What?
Yeah. He said, because they're all drinking beer. And if you're drinking a beer, you have to stay in the band tent. So in other words, because they're all on the other side of the fence, I said, so we're just going to play for people 100 yards away on another side of the fence. And then while sirens are going, I said, this is not good. He just looked at me like I was being a jerk. And I thought, okay, all right. So meanwhile, I was teaching guitar a lot at that time. And I had a student who had been teaching for about 3 or 4 years. By now he was about 15, I'm thinking. And he was really good. He was a really good guitar player, nice kid. And I said to him and his family, they lived a couple of towns away. I said, this would be the perfect time to get him on stage with us. We'll go over 2 songs that he's going to play with us. He and I will go over them, make sure he knows them, and we'll bring him up. So he comes up and plays with us at some point, and I told him, well, that was the worst gig I have ever done in my life, and you shared it with me. I said, you got it out of the way right away. Yeah, because what was happening was, once we turned the mics on in the PA system, the sirens were coming. The sound of the sirens was coming into the shell, reverberating around, going into the microphones, and coming back up through the monitor system.
Oh, no.
Oh, it was so difficult to play. It was unbelievable. It was torture. Like,
I'm just trying to think, who has the good idea? Okay, we're going to pay money to have a band play, but the whole time we're doing that, we're going to have sirens going off. It's like, it feels
sirens,
like
hoses.
it's just ridiculous. It's like, were they thinking? It almost seems like malicious, but it doesn't seem like it'd be an intentional.
Well,
like, that's ridiculous.
I said this to them. And so all we played for was a handful of kids who don't drink beer, and in front of us. And I said later, I said, look, I appreciate that you're paying us to play, but we also play because we enjoy it. And this is not enjoyable. And they just looked at me like they couldn't get it. They just didn't grasp it.
That's crazy.
But anyway, that's about, I really can't, thinking back, amplifiers blowing at gigs, that's always a problem. I remember in Cleveland, we were playing, it's about, how many years ago could this have been? 15 years ago? Yeah, about 50, maybe even more. And we're playing a ballroom style place, and we were doing the sound check. And after the sound check, I said, I just want to hang out. I got some new pedals I want to work on just to see if I want to use them. And all of a sudden the amp stops working. I turn around and it's on fire.
Oh no.
And it was like a $2,500 Marshall.
Wow.
Yeah. And then so the venue called the local guitar center, who was kind enough to bring over a Marshall head, and we got through that gig. And that amp cost me I think $800 to fix it.
Oh, that sucks. I remember seeing Cheap Trick one time about 12, 13 years ago, and the show got cut short because one of Rick Nielsen's amps caught on fire, and they had to bring in the fire marshal and everything.
I know Rick since 1970. Hard to believe. And that group Fuse was so great. And that's how I met them. We did a gig together, my band and his band in Wisconsin.
Would that have been with Bungie then?
Yes, I was with the band Bungie. It was a trio.
So I still think that's an interesting story because, so me personally, I grew up in sort of somewhat rural Pennsylvania, but then came out to Jersey about 2 or 3 years ago to pursue different musical opportunities because it's a little bit more busy out here than Pennsylvania. But you kind of did somewhat of the opposite back in the 70s by going from New Jersey out to Wisconsin. So what's the story of that?
Well, it's a funny thing how the world changes, demographics change. So New York had no scene. I don't care what anybody tells you. 1970, New York had no scene going on. I mean, we did have the Rascals and the Vanilla Fudge that came out of here, so there was something that was going on for sure. Two of my favorite bands, by the way, and by luck, I've gotten to know both bands through the years, and but there was really nothing going on. I was playing a strip club it wasn't even a strip club. It was back then. It was called an Exotic Dancers. They had exotic dancers, and I was playing these. They had 4 exotic dancers on stage and a trio in between them, and it was in Manhattan at the Metropole at 42nd Street. And these guys came up to me. I was doing it like 7 nights a week. I've been doing it for about 6 weeks. I was 20 years old, just turned 20 years old, in fact. And these guys came up to me. And the one guy, and they said, "We're listening to you play. You sound really great. And we need a guitar player in our band in Wisconsin. And that's why we're out here looking." I said, "Yeah, I don't know anything about Wisconsin." And they said, "Oh, it's great. There are kids everywhere, like teenagers and whatever. And their drinking age was lower in Wisconsin than it was here. And the University of Wisconsin had campuses in all the smaller towns. And he said, it's just great there." And I thought, I don't know. And he said, so we got to talk. And he seemed all right. So I said, well, I'm staying at my parents' house in Teaneck, New Jersey. I said, if you want to come out tomorrow and we'll go play some music together, let's see what it sounds like. And it sounded great. And I thought, yeah, that's great. Okay, when do you want to go? So I had a car. I don't know how they got out there. I don't think they had a car. Or if they did, they were leaving it in, I don't know. I don't know what was going on. I can't remember details like that from 100 years ago, but I had a station wagon. So we drove to Wisconsin in my station wagon. And they were right. It was great. Now, it wasn't Bungie. Their band that I joined, I didn't actually like, and I quit after about 5 weeks. But during that time, I made contacts with this guy playing bass, John Parrott was his name, and we had picked up a kid hitchhiking. He was about 16, and he looked like he was 20, and he had long hair, and he was tall, and he said he played drums. So we said, well, we'll come pick you up and, bring your drums over to our house that we were staying at and try you out. And the kid was great. So that became Bungie.
It's amazing. But also just like the fact that they came halfway across the country to find someone, they managed to find someone. I mean, I remember I was trying to put together like a top 40 cover band sort of thing like 3 years ago and trying to find the right lineup, even just from like local guys. And then I started expanding, looking around and like trying to find people and I'm thinking, oh, well, this guy lives like 2 to 3 hours away. He's not going to want to do this. But then here are these guys, literally travel halfway across the country and they find you. It's amazing.
Yeah. People just moved around a lot back then, it's different times. It's so different. I can't even describe it, really. It was much freer, much easier. You just were able to go anywhere you wanted to go all the time. It's different now. It's just different. But they were right. I had a great time out there. I mean, I don't think I ever saw those other two guys again that I joined. I don't know what they did, but I started this other band and we played all over the place. And as I said, we did a gig with Fuse and ended up having their manager, or I don't know if he was an agent manager, but Ken Adamati, he later became the manager, booking us a bit. And it was great. We moved down to Madison at some point because we were living in Appleton, Wisconsin, 100 miles north of Madison. It was a beautiful little town. I looked it up recently. It's like got 5 times the population that it once had. That's another problem that we have in this country. It's overpopulation in the city, like city suburb areas. Didn't have that back then. Yeah, like towns were just friendlier because smaller towns are friendlier than bigger ones. Don't you know what I mean?
Sure, I get what you're saying. So in the interview you did on Ryan Roxy's podcast, In the Trenches, you made mention of a student riot that happened in Oshkosh, Wisconsin. Can you tell the story of that?
Well, that's the first day I was there. So the first day I got there, imagine we must have driven 18, 20 hours. But, when you're 20 years old, you can stay up for 3 days in a row. So now he's taken the guy who's actually originally from Appleton was taking me around to meet people. And then he said, well, I'll take you to Oshkosh, which was, I don't know, maybe 15 miles away. I don't even know. but it was south of Appleton. He said, big college college campus there. I want you to see all these places. And I said, okay. This was the first day I'm out there. And we drive down there. We got there, it had to be between 11:30 and midnight by the time we got there. And lights everywhere and people running around like crazy. And I said, this is like wilder than New York City, And they said, yeah, it's cool here. And so we get out of the car and three guys approach us. One guy was 6'7", and they had rocks in their hands, which we didn't notice. And the one guy said, his name, they called him Jolly because for the Jolly Green Giant. He's still my friend to this day, by the way. He said, it's a good thing that one guy's got an afro, or we would have thrown rocks at your car. And we said, what? He said, there's a student riot. We thought you were the cops. And we're going, well, what do you mean? He said, yeah, somebody got run over and on the street here in the campus, and the students are upset that they didn't block this road off sooner. And I said, yeah, okay. And he said, you better come with us quick up on the hill. So I grabbed my acoustic guitar and we ran up on the hill. And got to know these three guys a bit. We're talking, and the big guy, he goes, you're pretty great on that guitar. I said, thanks. He goes, you got a band? And I said, yeah, we've got this band that we're putting together here. And he said, well, I'll work for you guys if you want. And we said, yeah, okay. So he was a Vietnam vet, and he was a couple of years older than me. And 6'7", that didn't hurt, having a big guy lugging equipment and scaring everybody off,
Sure.
What I didn't realize back then was if you had long hair in northern Wisconsin, you were considered a freak, and everyone tried to punch your lights out. So, and that's what was happening. If I was walking down the street, cars would pull over and people would get out and give me the middle finger. And I was like, what the hell? I just went back in time like 30 years or something. But I still had a great time there. And of course, it didn't hurt to have Jolly, like when people would harass us at a gig. Jolly would just go, okay, everybody, you got a problem? He was a funny guy. He's the head union rep for like road crews in Chicago for a number of years now.
Oh, wow.
And he also worked for Ozzy Osbourne in 1982, and got to know Randy and the whole band. And when that tragedy happened, that's why I ended up getting called, because he mentioned to the tour manager that Randy had always spoken about Starz, how much he loves Starz, and because they had this common thread that they both knew me, so, and that's how I ended up getting that audition.
It's amazing. So throughout your career, especially like during that time early on in your career, you did a fair amount of auditions with different bands. You got into Stories when you moved back to the East Coast, and you were there for roughly a year before that band split up, right?
Right. Yeah, I got in September. I think it could have even been August. It was August or September, 73. The song was number 1 in July. But the other guitar player, he gave 2 months notice. So he stayed for 2 more months, and I just played as a second guitar player, which was good because I was easing into learning the stuff that way. And I could see how he played it and stuff, and it helped me.
Very cool. So then after that, was it straight into Fallen Angels, or was there anything before that point?
Yeah, there were a few things. I did the Ian Lloyd band. Ian Lloyd, the singer of Stories, put his own solo band together. He had an album deal. We had Ian McDonald in the band playing various instruments. Ian McDonald from King Crimson, who wrote Court of the Crimson King. He's such a nice guy.
Amazing stuff.
He's such a great guy. He passed away 2 or 3 years ago now, unfortunately, but he was like this really humble, nice guy. And I said, wow, you wrote Court of the Crimson King? He goes, oh, they pulled it out of me. He was so humble. It's like they pulled it out of him, That's like one of the greatest prog rock songs of all time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. In fact, that's the first real prog rock band, that album, that Court of the Crimson King.
Was that 68 or 69? I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think it was 69, but I'm not sure.
Amazing stuff.
So we had a nice band. The story is kind of goofy, and I wound up quitting in the recording studio. I just There would be people who don't like this, but I'm anti-drug. so I guess a lot of people like drugs. They don't like people who don't like drugs. But the drummer was snorting lines of cocaine off the board.
Oh, geez. While recording?
Yeah, off the mixing board. And it was this particular studio that we were in. We had started doing stuff at Electric Lady Studios, and then we switched because we got a little bit of free time at Electric Lady, and then we got free time evidently at this other studio, which I can't remember the name of it. It was a more of a jingle house where they had a lot of studio rooms up there in Manhattan on 6th Avenue. I remember it was high up on like maybe the 5th or 6th floor, and that's what I remember about it. But I was only there that one time. And I said, look, Ian, there's all these like executives walking around here with clipboards and ties, suits and jackets and ties and stuff. And this jerk is snorting cocaine like a maniac, like a fiend on the board there. Come on, tell him to stop. And Ian wouldn't do it. And I wasn't in the position to do it. It wasn't my band. So I said, I don't understand why you're not telling him to stop. And he said, no, I can't. I said, what do you mean you can't? I said, look, I'm not trying to threaten you, but I am going to put my guitar in the case and leave and quit if it doesn't stop. And he said, well, I can't do it because he's the producer. And I said, I don't know. When did the drummer become the producer in this band? I never heard about this. He said, when he got us this free time at this great studio. I said, interesting. So you're not stopping him? He said, no. I said, I shook Ian's hand. We were good friends. I said, good luck with everything. I put my guitar in the case and I left. So that was the end of that band for me. And Mick Jones took my place. And Mick recruited Ian McDonald to be in his new band, that Foreigner, that album didn't come out for another 2 years after that, because that was 75 and Foreigner came out in 77.
It's amazing how all these things are interconnected.
Yeah, they are. And then around that same time, I started rehearsing. Like right after that, I started rehearsing with these guys. You remember the New York Rock and Roll Ensemble? Very, very few people do, but they had 3 albums out. Michael Kamen was the keyboard player. He was later David Bowie's musical director, keyboard player and stuff. But he was out of the band and they were trying to go a slightly different direction. So they added me, and the manager was Steve Metz. And Steve Metz owned the Beacon Theater in New York City. And they were having concerts there. So I would get free tickets to shows. So that was a pretty cool thing. And we would rehearse at the Beacon Theater. That was cool too. While that was going on, my guitar roadie, my former guitar roadie when I was in Stories, we became very close friends. His name was Tom Butler. He's since passed away, sadly, but he was a very good friend. Tom saw an ad in the Village Voice in the city, some Manhattan kind of a thing, and he said, this group is looking for a guitar player, and they're managed by Rocksteady Management. This is right up your alley, because at that point I had been pretty good friends with the guys in Kiss. I knew O'Coin and Bill O'Coin, and they had wanted me to leave Stories and put a new band together for Bill, because Bill wanted a second band, and I wasn't about to quit the band, but eventually we did split up. So he said, this could be perfect for you. So that's how I found out about that. And yeah, that was I got that right away and left the rock and roll ensemble.
Very cool. So then moving on to Fallen Angels, which then becomes Stars. And fast forwarding a little bit, just because I just think it's another story that it's probably not as well known as, the story of you guys coming back from a tour and you're shooting a music video, I think was for Sing It, Shout It. And you guys find out that it got cut down to like a single version, but cut very sloppily.
Yeah.
So then during the shoot of that music video, you had to pull one of your band members away from Bill O'Coin, who was choking him out at the time, pissed off about the song being cut down.
Yeah, that might have been the crucial turning point of our career. We were shooting videos for Cherry Baby and Sing It, Shout It. We did Cherry Baby first. Sing It, Shout It comes up. Now, we were just playing along. We were syncing to the pre-recorded thing.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, the chorus comes up way before it's supposed to come up, and we stop. Go, what's this? And Bill was there. He goes, oh, that's the edit. So we listened to the whole thing. We said, that sucks. It makes no sense. You cut out all, like basically it was just one chord. Everything was in A. They got rid of all the parts that went down, that were like releases from it. And it made no sense. And we said, well, who edited this? And he said, Jack did. I said, Jack would never do this. And he said, so obviously Jack was doing it. Bill was, vetoing it until he got what he wanted. And it was awful. I mean, maybe there was no good way to edit it. I don't know. But we were all like in a huff. And then Doobie was on his big drum riser behind us. And I remember he started screaming. He jumped off the stage. He ran over to O'Coin, threw him down to the ground, put his hands around his neck. I jumped off the stage when I saw that he was attacking him. And we had our road manager, I remember, was there. And I remember he and I were trying to get Doobie off of him. I mean, he didn't really hurt him. Just a lot of screaming. But Bill was, like this frail, guy who, dressed in a suit all the time. He was he seemed like a pretty nice guy and everything, other than his drug intake, which was also a problem. But he, I don't want to slag him. He was a nice guy. And later in time, maybe 15 years later, we reconnected, and he was great. We would talk on the phone a lot and see each other here and there. And he was a very nice person. I think when people do drugs, it just takes over their brain, So the song that week, Cherry Baby, was like number 33 with a bullet. And the record company had guaranteed that it was going to be a top 10 single to us. When they guarantee it, that means they're paying the people off, because it's all about payoffs. In the 70s, it was all fake. Everything was fake. It was all being paid. Radio stations were being paid, period. So I would call the office from the road. We were on tour. And I would always call the office from the road on a Monday, and I'd speak to Gail Rogers. She's still my friend on Facebook. I don't actually see her personally, but we do correspond. And Gail was the main person up in the office at that point, I guess. And I'd say, what are the numbers this week? The guys, want to know. Oh, she goes, 33. I said, well, no, it was 33 with a bullet last week. That means it's going up. So what's the number this week? She goes, it's 33. I said, does it have a bullet? She said, no. I thought that was odd. And then it went down the tubes. And then the next song, Sing It, Shout It, did not become a hit, went to 66. Now, I want you to know we never, ever put that together, that maybe Doobie choking Bill had anything to do with anything. Because the reason being that, I wouldn't do that to someone. I don't mean choke them. I wouldn't destroy someone's career to show how powerful I was. And no one in our band was evil enough to do anything like that. So we didn't think in that way until like 25 years later, when we got back together and we were just hanging around. I actually I said, you know what? Everything changed right after you did that, Doobie. I said, could it be a coincidence? I don't think so, because when we went in to do the next album, all of a sudden we didn't have Jack Douglas producing us. We weren't in the record plant. We had no producer, and we were in some crappy studio, to be honest with you. I don't want to say the name of it. I don't want to offend anyone, but in all honesty, it was a crappy studio, and the album was way subpar compared to the first two. Attention shoppers. So we were being thrown under the bus, and look back, I never asked Bill because I hadn't figured it out before he passed, or I would have asked him.
But still, like, you can put two to two together and see.
It seems that way, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Well, it's circumstantial evidence, we'll call it.
I also like the story how on the tour, towards the end of the tour for Coliseum Rock, how you guys are telling your roadies that if any Capitol representatives try to get to backstage, to deny them access.
Yeah, that probably wasn't a good thing either. But but at that point, we were really pissed off. That was a great album, that Coliseum Rock album, and And go figure. See, I guess that's why we didn't figure things out, because now we went up to Toronto. We did an album with Jack Richardson, who was a big time producer at a great studio that he owned called Nimbus 9. Bob Ezrin was part owner, and Bob was his protege. And, you know, it was a great time. And we had a great time up there. We played a couple of gigs while we were there in Toronto. And we went on a nice tour with Rush, but we were going to making record store appearances, you know, and our albums weren't in there. The Coliseum Rock wasn't in the stores. Now, they had local Capitol reps. They know we're doing this. How did the albums not end up in the store, right?
Makes no sense, but you hear that story so many times from so many bands. It's ridiculous.
Well, we were irate. The album, I don't even think the album hit the charts. And we were really pissed off. So we're hanging out in LA now for some reason. I guess that was where the last shows were that we did. And we continued to do like local shows. And we wrote an entire album's worth of stuff. I don't know where that music went, but that's long gone somewhere. But we didn't want to record the album for Capitol, you know. So I guess I was at the band rep at that point. So I called O'Coin in New York and said, get us off that label. And he said, no, they love you. I said, no, they don't. They hate us. And we don't want to be there. So he agreed, and then he called me back, said, okay, I got you off the label. And I said, great, well, we have all the music ready, so let's pick another label. Oh, and he goes, no, I can't get your record contract. The labels are only signing new wave and punk bands now. And I said, whoa, you knew that before I asked you to get us off the label? Well, yeah, he goes. And I said, well, I didn't. We're just musicians. We don't know these things. Now what? He goes, I don't know. I said, great, I'll tell the band. And that was really the end, you know.
But I still don't personally get how someone, because 1979, 1980, Kiss is still hugely successful. So I don't get how someone...
It was going down fast.
So was the decline really that fast then?
It was fast. The only two groups that pulled through that really well were AC/DC and Van Halen. And then, you know, rock groups. And then other rock groups that did well lived in Europe, like Judas Priest and Scorpions. And Europe didn't have this bullshit new wave punk thing like to the degree that we had here. And I have nothing against it. I shouldn't say bullshit. You know what I mean? It's just the way it just becomes a fad. It's the only thing going.
Yeah, I mean, it disrupted the current thing that was going on.
Yeah, whereas in Europe, then I guess they're not that fanatical. The hard rock thing stayed, and those groups were able to exist playing over there.
It's kind of weird when you think, though, that like a lot of like the big name like synth and new wave bands came from England, you know, obviously part of Europe. So that is kind of strange.
Yeah, I'm sure it was a big fad there too. But again, here it just became like, it's just like everything that happens here. I think it's because TV was always so big here. It's not as big in Europe. It wasn't back then anyway. And it takes over everything, you know, like it's kind of weird. So
then you had MTV in 1981, further changing the whole landscape.
Yeah, making it worse because the whole new wave thing just got bigger and bigger. I mean, nothing against new wave. There's a lot of stuff I like from it, but it just, the hard rock bands, I mean, Kiss was playing small places. Cheap Trick was playing small places. It was getting worse and worse for every band. And then it came back around in '84 and MTV helped bring it around. But by then we were just dead in the water, you know, so for us, it didn't it didn't help us. But, you know, Michael lived on the West Coast. We actually made a shot at it. Michael and I with a band called Hellcats.
So I was going to ask about the Hellcats also, because from what I was reading online, there was the EP released in 1982 on REO Records, and then 5 weeks later, that label went bankrupt.
Yeah.
What do you know what happened with that label?
Oh, Coin bought him out. No, I'm joking. You know, Bill's passed away, and honestly, I don't want to just slag the guy. That's not what I'm out to do. But what happened was we were getting great airplay, FM airplay, and selling some units, and we were supposed to do a tour. I believe it was with Ted Nugent, and we had a great lineup. We sounded great. Boy, that album was That's a great EP. I don't know if you listened to it, but I'm really happy with that EP. Unfortunately, our manager is one of the people who's calling me right now. But our manager at the time, Rick Stewart, was trying to get in touch with the label, and he called me up. He said, "It just rings. It's like no one answers." I said, "That's not good." But I said, "Call Atlantic Records." That was the label that they were like a subsidiary of, I guess.
Yeah.
And they said, "Oh yeah, they went out of business." It's like, I said, "Well, tell them to put us on Atlantic," and they wouldn't do it. I don't know why. I don't remember the details, but just, at that point, I got so disgusted with everything. I was playing in a cover band like 7 nights a week, and I just said, screw it, I'll just do that. And then I got sick with that. I just kind of gave up music for a period of time after that. Too much bullshit. Plus, I was married and had two little boys. One, they were like, let's see, 1983, they were 5 and 2. I wanted to be part of their lives, and I don't know, just kind of got into coaching sports.
But then 2003, Starz reunites, and you were playing like solo gigs before that also, right?
Oh, I was really done before that. Like, I just didn't want to play. And then in 2001, I started playing just trio gigs. And when I say play, 1 a week. And then in 2003, we, by accident, got back together. It was truly an accident. And did 3 gigs. We all had a lot of fun. So I said, well, we'll try and do it every year. And that's how it really snowballed after that.
That's awesome. Well, I just have like a couple more questions. So obviously, we've recently lost Ace Frehley, and a tremendous loss to the music world. I was wondering if you had any fun stories with him, from the days of touring with Kiss.
Well, we only did a couple of shows with Kiss, but with Ace and I go back to 1974 when I was in Stories. We stayed at the same hotel in LA for, I don't know, about 8 or 10 days maybe. And they were recording Hotter Than Hell. And we were playing the Whiskey and doing other shit while we were there. I don't know, other gigs. And we just hit it off great. I can tell you the quick story, as I've told it over and over probably, but it's a funny story. So Kerner and Wise were producing Stories, and we're producing Kiss. And we were in the city, some studio, recording what turned out to be our last 2 singles. And I was doing some guitar parts. I was sitting at the board, and Richie Wise holds up this album in my face, the first Kiss album. And I said, "What is that?" He said, "Oh, it's a new album I produced." I said, "No, but what's on the cover there? Why is there a cartoon drawing?" And he said, No, that's their faces. I said, "Nobody looks like that. I mean, what do you mean?" He said, "They paint their faces." I said, "Why?" Oh, he goes, "I don't know." And it really struck me weird. Like, I'll never forget it. It was like, what the hell? And he goes, "Hey, listen, I know you love hard rock stuff. This is hard rock. Take this album." I said, "Okay." And I loved it. Absolutely, to this day, love that first Kiss album so much. And so evidently, as I started seeing what was going on, none of the other bands like Kiss. They all resented their theatrics, and called them all kinds of names. And I thought it was great, So we played in San Francisco on this tour, Stories that we were doing. And then we had to play in LA, and we drove from San Francisco to LA, and we got in really late, like midnight. And we're at the Ramada Inn on Sunset Boulevard, and we're checking in. Our road manager, is at the desk checking in. It's a tiny little room, I remember. And this girl walks into the room. She goes, "Hey, you got some water?" To the guy at the desk. I said, so I looked at her. I said, "Where you from, Brooklyn?" And she goes, "Yeah." So I said, "What are you doing here?" She goes, "Oh, I'm married to Peter Criss. He's the drummer for Kiss, and the band's here, staying here." I said, "They're staying here?" She said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, where are they?" She said, "They're in the pool area. A couple of guys are in the pool." So I walked out there. They all had their makeup on, and Gene and Paul were actually in the pool about waist high in their outfits, in the leather, and their makeup on. They were at a photo session or something. And they had a tray. I think Paul had the tray with like champagne on it or something. And I ran it, I was so excited to meet them. I said, "Oh my God." I said, "I can't believe you guys. Well, first of all, you're fucking crazy. What are you doing in the pool with your outfits on?"
Yeah.
And they're laughing. I said, I said, you guys, I love you guys, man. I think that album is so great. I listen to it all the time. And they were so thrilled by that because everybody hated them. The bands, all the other bands hated them.
Yeah.
And they really liked that. And so we hit it off. We stayed at the place for the week and we just got to be really good friends. And I went into the studio with them. They said, come hang out at the studio. Kenny Aronson and I went. Kenny was the bass player in Stories. And he's quite famous. He's been in a million bands. If you don't already know Billy Squier, Billy Idol, Joan Jett.
Sure.
The list goes on and on. So, and we're still good friends to this day. So we were hanging out there and I remember Ace was playing a solo and he goes, Richie, what do you like? Do you like that solo, man? What do you think? He had that great Bronx accent,
Yep.
And I said, well, and Richie Weiss said, Richie, he's talking to you. Go in there and talk to him. So I said, yeah, I like that one right there. That one you just did. It was that one that goes, get in. What is that song? He goes with the guitar and it goes down and those, I can't think right now. But anyway, he was a great free spirit, really good guy, really good soul. And he touched a lot of lives, so many lives. And I would see him from time to time. It was always a love fest, like we'd always be so happy to see each other. And, he cleaned up his act for many years. And I always told him I was proud of him. And it really hit me hard. It really did.
So also earlier this year, maybe a month or two before that, we lost Ozzy, another big loss to the music world. So I remember when hearing when you did your interview, when you did your audition with Ozzy, he wasn't actually there for the session. You were just working with Rudy Sarzo and the rest of the band.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw a lot of musicians, whether local musicians or big name musicians, after Ozzy passed, they were posting letters they got. I think when Zakk Wylde left and they were doing auditions for the next guitar player after him, and a lot of them were posting like pre-typed letters from Ozzy saying, "Oh, we found a different guitar player, but we're going to keep your name for reference," and that sort of thing. Did you get anything like that since that was early on 1982?
No, you got to remember, it's just me, Robert Sarzo, and Bernie Torme were the only three guitar players. And Bernie got the gig for a very short time. I believe he did, I don't know, maybe 3 gigs. I'm just guessing. Years later, I became friends with Bernie and we talked about that. And he said, I didn't listen to Ozzy's stuff. I didn't know it. The record company over in England flew me out saying, "Oh, you're great. You should go do it." He said, but I just wasn't familiar with the music, and it didn't work out, So we had a few laughs about that whole thing. But so I don't think they didn't really say much of anything. They just said, we took Bernie Torme, and Bernie I didn't meet out there. I only met Robert, and I just knew each other. I heard Robert play with them. I was at his audition right there. He played great. I thought he was perfect for the job more than I was, because I really do that finger tapping thing,
Yeah.
I just don't like doing that, but I had to learn it to do that, to play a couple of those solos. But I did all right. I think I did well enough to get the gig, really. But and I thought Robert did great, but they took the wrong guy because Bernie wasn't a tapper either. He was really blues oriented.
Yeah. I mean, phenomenal player, but a different kind of player.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the word was Ozzy wanted a blonde-haired guy, and that influenced the decision. And then somehow, when it wasn't working out, they found out about Brad Gillis.
Mm-hmm. And it may seem kind of insane to someone listening to one of these stories just saying, "Oh, like the color of his hair influenced that." But like somewhere around that same time period, I don't remember if it was before or after all that, but when George Lynch of Dokken was auditioning for the band.
Incredible story. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, well, he had short hair at the time, so they denied him for that reason.
Do you know something funny? He did a what do you call those things when you go to a music store and you do a seminar kind of
clinic?
Yeah, clinic, right. So he did the Sam Ash Clinic right by my house here on Route 4 in Paramus, which is now out of business. And somebody I know went and said, it was a weird thing. He said, if you're auditioning for someone, always make sure you look like a rock star. And I thought, well, he looks like a rock star. Why is he even saying that? That's weird, isn't it? And I never knew why, because that was years ago until that came out online about the hair thing, about him having short hair. But they really screwed him over. Jeez, He had 2 little kids, and he was, which I had 2 little kids at the time too, by the way. And I'm not saying they screwed me over. They did not at all. But with him. He was coming to rehearsal. He said, I read his little interview, and he said, no, I heard it. It was an audio thing. And he said, one day he was there and he saw Jake E. Lee walk in looking like a total rock star. And he said, I'm done.
Music business is crazy.
Appearance on stage is an important thing in certain types of bands. Certainly new wave bands had a look, punk bands had a look, and hard rock, heavy metal bands have a look,
Sure. I mean, image, it's live music, so image is a big part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. No question.
So I just like a nice question to wrap everything up. Of everything you've done in your career, what achievement are you most proud of? Is there like a particular moment that you're most proud of?
Oh, wow. No, I don't think so. I'm just happy to be alive, happy to remember what I did. I mean, Stories was great. Starz was great. Played on American Bandstand with Stories. That was eventful. Don Kirshner's rock concert with Starz, where Led Zeppelin was, they had footage of Led Zeppelin, so it was advertised. Starz. Mother's Finest was the other group. And that the 49th anniversary of that was a few days ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And, those things are cool. And I really can't say, I can't just pinpoint one thing. I'm just glad I did what I did. I set out to do what I did, which is, important. Like when you set out with a goal and you actually achieve it, that's what you have to be proud of. And I'm still happy I'm still playing.
I think it's amazing. Okay, so I remember when we spoke before, you mentioned that you're working on a bit of an autobiography, and you mentioned on Ryan Roxley's show that there's a Starz rockumentary in the works. What's the progress on both of those two things?
The autobiography is really difficult when I'm doing 5 gigs a week, but I keep working on it. The rockumentary thing fell through, and now we're going in a different area to try and get that done because it should be done.
Okay. All right. Well, just wanted to give an update for anyone who was following the progress of that.
Yep. Thank you.
Well, Richie, I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk. Again, like you're an inspiration to me and how many countless others out there. So I do appreciate you taking the time to tell some stories here on my show.
Well, I'm glad I could be an inspiration to anyone because that's the highest compliment that a guitar player or a musician could hear. Really, thank you.
Well, thank you for being a guest here on Gig Nightmares, and thanks for keeping the music alive.
All right. And you too. Thanks for keeping the music alive, Max. Great to talk to you.
Yep. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.
We hope you enjoyed this week's episode of Gig Nightmares. Gig Nightmares is an independently produced podcast made possible by the support of listeners like you. If you enjoyed this week's episode, we would appreciate if you left a rating and a review for us. Gig Nightmares.